Hey everybody, it's Tony Robbins. Listen, I've spent 42 years of my life, yes, I've been doing this 42 years, blows my mind, really searching for people that are the best in the world at what they do. People that have a domain mastery, an area of knowledge that can really make a difference in the quality of people's lives. And I look for people that are not only the best, but they have a track record of being the best. They don't just speak the words. And most importantly, people that are passionate about sharing and giving the insights. They're not trying to hold back. And that's part of how our guest today and I met and now become dear friends over the years. Because Than Merrill, the man you're about to meet, is one of the most successful real estate investors in the United States. And for 15 years, he's been in this real estate investing and lending industry. And over that time, he's done some amazing things. He's the founder and principal in several real estate firms, but they've done a business in over $1 billion in business combined right now, the businesses he's a part of. And in the last year alone, and the commercial and residential real estate side, they've acquired and been involved with over $300 million in the last 2 years, actually. So he's really got an amazing momentum. And he's also the founder of Fortune Builders, which is an educational company that teaches people how to invest effectively. And I've had several of my dearest friends and also a lot of my clients have gone through and just raved about it, like raving fan, not like, oh, it was good. And so that's how I originally sought you out, Merrill. But I just want to, first of all, say thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And I'm excited to share with our audience some insights of your career. I think maybe let's just start at a fundamental level. Tell me, what got you in this business originally? Share a little about your history, because I know you were an NFL player, and how did you go from that into real estate investing, and why are you so passionate about this type of investing specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my background's a little untraditional. I started in the NFL. I wasn't the best athlete by any means. I played in the league for 2 years, but it was an amazing experience. I learned a lot, and some of my early mentors were coaches of mine, father figures, people who I learned a lot from. And well, going into my second year, how I eventually transitioned into real estate, I think is very relevant, because there's probably a lot of your folks who are saying, hey, where does real estate fit in my game plan? And I was going into my second year in the NFL, and I knew, I just had a feeling, I don't know if I'm going to play 2 or 5 years, and so I better start studying some things. I better start learning. And so I did what all smart NFL players do. I started a Mexican restaurant as my first business, right? And it was between my first and second year. And
didn't you go to Yale?
I did go to Yale.
Yeah, I just said, well, what the hell happened to your education?
Sometimes you think you have a good idea that's going to work, and it doesn't always work that way.
I understand. I've been there. Trust me.
So, anyways, I ended up getting hurt, and then I ended up getting cut from the NFL.
Wow.
And so I went back to essentially protect my investment, and I started transition from an NFL player into delivering burritos and line cook and working with guacamole. And I will say it was both a blessing and a curse, because every single week we had a new problem would crop up, and I was constantly feeding the business. And I got to a point where I had basically $30,000 left in the bank and a business that was eating away at my life savings that I had earned in the NFL. And I said, I got to do something. I kind of came to that turning point in my life.
Yeah.
And so I started looking for other avenues and other channels, and I started to just reflect back on the mistakes I had made with my restaurant. And what I realized was it wasn't the industry, or it wasn't the business that I was. The restaurant industry is tough, but what I realized is that I wasn't equipped, right, to be a successful business owner at that age.
Yes.
I just didn't have the education. I didn't have any mentors, anybody who could guide me. I was overconfident. And it truly humbled me. And it was at that point that I said, I'm gonna take a step back and reevaluate my life. Do I want to go work on Wall Street? Do I want to go work in the financial industry? Do I want to work for somebody else? Do I want to go back to business school or something of that nature? And what I realized after all of my studies is that real estate was something that I thought was going to interest me. I didn't know if I was going to love it, but I started on the side while I was working basically 9 to 7 at the restaurant. On the side, we started buying and redeveloping houses. We started buying rental properties, and I fell in love with it. And I realized it was also a way out from a business that was failing. And for me, that was one of the most monumental transitions. And I know if you're sitting at home and watching, we've all been through those experiences in our life where we have a tremendous valuable lesson that we take away, and we transition. And so for the past 15 years, I've been investing in real estate, and both residential and commercial. And the only reason I'm sitting here with you today is I changed my approach. You often talk about modeling other successful people. I had I was blessed to have some great mentors very early on in my career who taught me a lot about the business. And when I transitioned from the restaurant to the real estate business, I said, I'm going to do the exact opposite. I at that time, I was suffering from a little bit of depression. I was at a young age, fell on my face financially, and I said, I need to do something different with my life, and I got to take a different approach if I'm going to have success. And it was actually at that time I read your book, Awaken the Giant Within.
Wow.
And I'll never forget the monumental mindset shift I had, and then I just took those mechanics and systems and took a completely different approach, and that's why I sit here today, is just that shift that I made early on.
One of the reasons I wanted, besides your unbelievable skill and what you've built, I think your story is so relatable because so many people, people think life is a straight line. When I know what I want, I'm committed, and when you're really young, you think you're bulletproof, right?
Yeah.
But the average NFL players, their career's 3.5 years, 4 years. I mean, it's like they spent their whole life and then they get injured, they get hurt. Exactly what happened to you, and they don't have a plan, and they're used to spending really big.
Yeah.
Or with your business, the example with your restaurant. I mean, so many businesses don't make it. People forget that 50% of all businesses are gone in a year, 80% are gone in 5 years, 96% of businesses are gone in 10 years. That means 4% make it. 4 out of 100 make it. Make it doesn't mean they're profitable.
Yeah.
So I'm always telling people you've got to understand that the only time you see a straight line is a human built it. In nature, there's no straight lines. Everything is winding. But if it's growing, it's winding up.
Yep.
And so you've made those winds along the way. So tell us, what were some of the turning points or lessons along that way, because we condensed it, that stand out in your mind that really called you? Because most entrepreneurs have had a turning point.
Sure.
And I hear the NFL turning point, I hear the restaurant, but what lesson did you get out of that still affects you to this day and helps you to continue to succeed?
Yeah, and I think this will be a very applicable lesson to everybody at home. I'll never forget the moment that I made the transition. I started the business on my college campus, the Mexican Grill, and I was delivering burritos one night, and somebody recognized me, and they said, "Hey, I thought you were playing for the Chicago Bears." And I was a young guy, and I was full of bravado. And at that moment, my ego was, for the first time in my life, I felt like just crushed. And then I remember sitting in the car and thinking, "Gosh, I'm losing all the money that I've saved, in this business and from the NFL." And so I realized I got to do something different. Well, a couple weeks later, I went to a conference, a real estate conference, and that moment changed my life because I wasn't the son of a real estate developer, or my parents were in completely different industries, and in that moment in time, I went to a workshop, and it opened my eyes to a whole new possibility. And I'll never forget one of the lessons that I learned that I think would be very applicable to a lot of your folks who are business owners, who are executives, professionals. Yeah. And if you don't mind, I'll draw it on the board.
No, please.
Here.
You said you're going to do that. Thank you.
So one of my mentors, it's a very simple concept, and some people may have heard of it before, and inevitably somebody like you with your financial acumen has seen it. But for me, it was a shift because at this time I had bought myself a job. And I was working in the job.
Yeah, meaning your restaurant.
Yeah,
I bought yourself a job.
I bought myself a job, and I was self-employed, and I was trying to make this transition. And one of the lessons that one of my early mentors taught me, and this has really shaped my life. It was a moment that I'll never forget, where I saw two different worlds, and I realized I was in this world, and I wanted to be over here financially.
Yes.
And I started to make the connection of how to get there.
Yeah.
Now, it took me a lot of time to actually make that transition, but it gave me some context to a whole new goal in life. And so what my mentor was talking about is he shared, the most important thing he did in his life financially was to track everything on an annual basis. And so he had a personal financial statement. And many of you, if you've applied for a loan, have probably taken out a personal financial statement. And he said, every year I monitor that personal financial statement. And then what I do is I spend a few days looking at ways to improve my personal financial statement in the sense of I evaluate my insurance, I evaluate my tax planning, my estate planning, I review and look at how I protect my assets. And he had a little checklist.
Yes.
And he said I start with my personal financial statement, I set some goals, and then what I do is I look to add assets that are going to add income to my life that aren't going to be dependent on my work.
Yes.
And so what he described is he said, there's two ways we go through life earning income. Some people have a job during their income. Some people obviously acquire assets. And so what he said is, our goal over here is to add assets. Today, we're going to be talking about real estate. We're going to be talking about loans. We're going to be talking about single family homes, commercial properties, commercial syndications, tax liens. These are assets that we buy, right? That we acquire.
Yes.
And instead, think of it like you're adding, most people think, I'm going to get a second job to earn more money. What we do is we think, how can we add assets? And he said, what wealthy, financial educated people do is they add these assets over time that create income. And the goal is to get this income to be as passive as possible, right? And then that income is what pays our expenses and takes care of
passive meaning that, so people are clear, that you don't have to work for it.
Exactly.
The asset itself is just providing the income. Plus that income is much more tax advantage, as you well know.
Absolutely.
So you get to keep more of it, ironically.
Yeah, and so what he said is as you financially educate yourself and as you grow, you continue to learn different ways to add assets. And pretty soon, your assets are doing the work and you don't have to be trading your time for money.
Yes.
And what he did is he drew a second diagram. I'll make it brief here. He said most people, though, the way they earn income is they have a job. You know, we've been taught to go to school, to work hard so we can get a good job. And traditional education, in my opinion, does a great job preparing us to be employees. Unfortunately, it doesn't train us to be entrepreneurs and business owners and investors. He said most people, they trade their time for money through a job, and that is where how their money flows. And I'll never forget this diagram because I said, that's me. I bought myself a job as a self-employed. You know, I thought I was a business owner, but I had bought myself a job. Well, gosh, there was a whole nother way. And when I started to realize that, it created a desire to learn how to do this, right? And so the reason I bring this up is this context shift is important. We're going to talk today about different ways, different investment real estate strategies that are going to add assets to our balance sheet. They're going to add income. And I'll never forget because after applying what he said, every single year for the next few years, in January, I would update my personal financial statement. And I'll never forget the day that I actually got to the point where I said, you know what, I have more income coming in than expenses. And I wouldn't call that financial freedom, but I'd call that financial security. And I'll never forget that feeling that I had that day. And so that's really what we're here to talk about. If you're sitting at home and saying, how does this apply to my life? Well, just imagine if we could create financial security over the course of the next 12, 24 months, just doing some simple things in real estate. You know, a proven asset class that can get you to the point of financial security and ultimately, as you continue to grow, financial freedom. Right? And so, you know, he shared a story with me I'll never forget. He said, you know, someday, if you apply what I'm teaching, this was him talking to the audience. I felt like he was talking to me, right? But he was talking to everybody. And he said, someday you'll wake up in the morning, you'll have a cup of coffee, and you'll actually go through the annual financial checklist, this exercise, and you'll realize that you don't have to work anymore.
It's the greatest feeling in the world.
And then
what you do, at least in my experience, is you work harder, but you work harder at something you love. Right? You do what you enjoy, you know, but you know you don't have to. You walk different, you talk different, everything is different when you don't have to work.
It's a confidence thing, and for me, in that moment, I wanted that, because I had the exact opposite feeling. I had a lack of confidence. And for me, it just made a tremendous difference. And so that's, you know, what I've been doing for the past 15 years, but I've also been blessed enough to train tens of thousands of other people how to do the exact same thing with real estate. And so,
well, tell us a little bit. First of all, this is why I'm so excited to share with our audience, because I have that investment background, and I didn't have it. I grew up poor. We had nothing. We have money for food. That's why I feed 100 million people a year, 100 million meals a year in the U.S. is to give back, because somebody fed our family. But at this stage of my life, I have a great deal of expertise in this area, and I'm privileged enough, as you do, I do own my own businesses. And so, you know, I built up both my investment assets and my businesses to a level that's ridiculous. I mean, there's anything I want to do, I can do. So now my passion is, how do you feed 1 billion people? You know, how do you save, 10,000 people? I just planted 10 million trees, and I'm going to buy 100 million trees. And it's like, these goals are what excite me now, because you don't have to work. And I want this audience to have it. And I have tools that somebody already owns a business, like Business Mastery, that type of program. I can take them and grow them like crazy. But I don't have the tool for someone who has no money, just getting started, the vehicle. And you really have refined this vehicle. That's what. So first of all, tell me a little bit about what your real estate investing business looks like today, and why real estate today. Where's the opportunity in the current environment we're in?
So today my business looks very different than when I started 15 years ago. When I started 15 years ago, I was acquiring single family properties that were both rentals and properties that we're fixing and flipping. And that's where I advocate. If you're at home, that's a great place to start, to dip your toe in the water, to add a couple assets to your balance sheet. Well, over the years, that business grew, and we've bought and sold over 1,000 residential properties. And about 6 years ago, we started a commercial real estate investing business. And that business, two completely different businesses. That company, we focus on apartment buildings.
Okay.
And so just to give you some perspective, over the last 2 years, we've acquired over 1,300 apartments.
Wow.
Right? And we've acquired over 1.5 million square feet of retail.
Wow.
Right? So it's apartment and retail shopping center focused. But it's interesting because we still have the single family business. What I started with 15 years ago today, still running 15 people in that company that operate very efficiently. And we just created systems to basically replace myself. And so I spend most of my time now on our commercial assets. So I fly around the country looking at apartment buildings and retail buildings. But I still oversee where we started, a single family fix and flip property.
Yeah.
And so I have the perspective of both worlds. And I think for those of you who are watching, why is that relevant to you? Because many of you may decide, hey, I want to do this passively. I don't want to get involved in fix and flip, but I want to, maybe own a couple rentals or make a couple investments. And for other people, they might say, hey, I'd like to take a little dabble at this business and try it on a part-time basis and maybe even transition full-time. So that's kind of the context of what the businesses look like today.
Well, one of the great things about you, and we'll talk about it as we come through here, that I was blown away when I first started seeing your work, is you're so systems driven. Mm-hmm. People don't understand the power of systems. I couldn't do what I do unless it was systems. I can't do 10, 15, 20,000. I did an event the other day, 32,000 people. The number of systems that are in place to make that go, that are behind the scenes, are crazy. But that's
impressive.
why we keep growing, and we can do and blow people away. So your system more. But let's talk a little bit about Fortune Builders and your company there, and tell us a little bit about how people who want to get started in real estate can grow, can educate themselves on what you do in that area.
Yeah. What I realized, like you, when you achieve a certain level of success in your life, you kind of start saying, well, what's next? Both you and I don't have to ever work again financially, right? So what is it that drives us? And what I realized, much like you, is that my calling, not only as an investor, but is as a teacher.
Yeah.
And I love working with entrepreneurs who have a goal and say, hey, I would like to create better, more financial security in my life, or I'd like to get into real estate and actually start a business. And so how I got into it is I was speaking at all these different conferences, around the country, just about my real estate business and what we were doing and the systems we had built. And inevitably at the end of the conference, I'd have numerous people come up and say, gosh, can I come shadow in your office? Show me what systems you're using that I could apply to my business. And I realized, this might be something that I might enjoy doing. And so we did our very first workshop many, many years ago. Yeah. And I realized that I absolutely loved it. Yeah. Because I think it's one thing to create success for yourself, but when you can create successful businesses or help create or be the genesis for thousands of other people to start businesses, that's even more exciting. And it really gives me a purpose in life. And so that's what we do. We do 3-day educational workshops with clients all over the country. And then we also do coaching and consulting with clients for people that really want to grow a systems-dependent business. So we introduce people basically, hey, this is what real estate investing looks like at our workshops. And then for those people who want to continue on, I tell them we can take you as far as you really want to go.
I think that's so important because just like the business you talked about, with the restaurant, people jump into a business, they don't have any systems. And the system sounds complex. It sounds like computers or, It's not that. It's just having the checklist. It's knowing where to go. It's having things simplified. It's so you can do more with less, faster. Yeah. It's just like technology today. People wouldn't, you wouldn't go around using a phone from 15 years ago. Now you got a system in your pocket that's so sophisticated. It makes the guys who went to the Apollo mission didn't have 1/1,000th the amount of computing power in your pocket. And we take it for granted because it's so simple. So it's not just simples, it's the simplicity that as I speak out loud to myself, that I really was impressed by. You took systems, it's so simple, anybody could do them. So let's get into it for a second. Let's talk about some folks who don't have a lot of capital. Okay. And they really want to get started in real estate and they think I can't. And they've heard all kinds of stories that are up and down, good or bad. Yeah. What would you recommend to somebody that's just getting started and really wants to get in real estate, but they're in their current situation, they don't have a lot of capital to get started?
Yeah. It's a great question because I know people who are watching us right now, there's probably a wide spectrum. You probably have people that have been investing for years. You have people that have dabbled in real estate. You have people that know nothing about real estate. Yeah. And then you have people who have capital and you have people who have some capital and some who don't have much capital at all, right? And so what I like about real estate is that no matter where you're on that spectrum, there's a strategy. Yes. There's a strategy you can utilize to enhance your financial well-being. So I'll start with a basic strategy. For more experienced people, we're going to get to some more experienced strategies in a second, but let me start with something simple. And so
not capital intensive.
Yeah, and not capital intensive.
Great.
And not time intensive.
Cool.
Because some real estate developments and projects are time intensive.
Yeah.
If someone tells you different, they're not giving you the honest answer about real estate.
Yeah.
But there are some that are less time intensive. And so this strategy is perfect. If you don't have a lot of capital, you want to learn the business, and you may not have a lot of time. And what this strategy is, it's called wholesaling. It's a very basic strategy. I have a couple slides up here.
Let's put it up there.
We've got some diagrams. We might do some overlays. We got like a
What I really wanted when I
approach.
said to Than today is that rather than just interview about your past and the background, let's actually teach people some things today that hopefully you can grab and go for a run with. Perhaps.
And we'll throw up some visuals on the screen. We got a full, this is like a
more like a workshop.
Yeah, it's like a TV quality production back here. So what wholesaling is, I think the easiest way to define it is just to break a transaction down. And so I'm gonna show you a transaction and the flow of a transaction, and I'll give you a story that I think will make it applicable. Everyone is driven by properties that they see that look dilapidated or they need work, and so that's what we're going to focus on. We're not going to focus on pretty homes. We're not going to focus on apartment buildings right now. We'll talk about that later.
Sure.
Let's start with something that's probably in your backyard. You've probably driven by 100 different times, and it's a house that it might look something like this. There's a little overgrown. The house is a little bit older, unkept. Well, a lot of times in every market around the country, there's these properties that can be bought at a discount. And what we're going to do, what wholesaling is, to make it real simple, is you're going to locate a property, you're going to negotiate a contract on a discount, and instead of you fixing it up and doing the work and then reselling it later on, you're actually going to sell the contract to another investor. So if you were an investor in my area, maybe I found this deal, you want to go in there and fix it up and sell it.
And I have the capital.
Exactly. And what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to secure it with a contract and sell you the contract. So let's walk through some numbers. I think it's easier to conceptualize when we have some numbers, right? Cool. So let's say this house, if it were fixed up, would be worth $400,000.
After repairs.
Yeah, it's not worth that right now, obviously.
Yeah.
And this house needs about $30,000 in work. So it needs a little bit of fix up, a little bit of kitchen and bath, simple things inside. Perfect opportunity for somebody saying, hey, I want to dip my toe in the water and just get involved in this type of transaction. So how long does this transaction take? Well, I'm going to walk you through a series of steps that over the course of about 30 to 45 days, someone, if they spent 10 to 15 hours of time, could put this transaction together.
Okay, great.
So we're not talking a full-time job. We're talking just
so I can keep my job, keep what I'm doing. I don't have to take massive risk. I don't need a lot of capital. I just need to do some sweat work, a little bit of sweat work to do my homework, and you're going to show them how to do that.
Exactly.
Okay,
So this property, obviously, we're not going to pay $400,000. We're not going to pay $370,000. We're not going to pay $350,000. We're going to look to negotiate a good price on this property. So the way we do it, we use something. It's a simple deal calculator that we use. We plug in some numbers that we believe are going to be the outcome of this property for the person who's ultimately going to buy it from us, right? Yes. And so we do some quick calculations, and let's just say at the end of the day, we said we're going to make an offer of $300,000. Now, not every offer is going to get accepted on every transaction. But if you're consistently finding these opportunities, you will find people that say, hey, I want to sell. I don't want to deal with an agent. I just want to get rid of this property. I need a solution.
Tell us the mindset, the kind of personality, the kind of person that might be in that situation who might sell you for a lower price just to get out quicker.
Yeah. There is a tremendous market for this. A lot of people don't realize every walk of life, there's foreclosures, there's people getting divorced, there's people that are moving, there are people that have properties that just don't know how to maximize the value or have the money to fix them up. So we're talking about a significant number of properties.
People that are older and they need
every city around America has these types of situations. And I'll give you some examples of what we do in our business and how consistently we do it. But just imagine you put it under contract at $300,000. But let's say I were new and I were just testing the waters and I'm trying to figure out how I can make some money. Well, I'm going to go find another investor, somebody who might have a little bit more experience or somebody who might have a little bit of capital. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to market this contract to them, and I'm just going
to... You've already done it. You've given them this analysis as part of your system, your checklist. So this is done for you. You can plug in the numbers, and you just show them, here's what it's really worth with $30,000 of improvements.
Exactly. Now, the calculator might oversimplify it because there's a lot that we teach at our workshops, how we value real estate, how we estimate the repairs, how we calculate. But for the simplicity of the diagram, what we would do is we would market that property to another person at a premium price. So we would mark this up to, let's say, $320,000. So I'm going to market this particular property to, let's say, Tony at $320,000. Tony says, okay, I can buy it at $320,000. I'm going to put in $30,000. I can still earn a significant profit for doing the work.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show Tony, or I might show another investor the property. And then I'm ultimately going to make a decision. At the end of the day, we're either going to sell the contract or we're going to close on the property and resell it. And so the way I equate it, you're finding a bargain property, you're turning around to a bargain hunter. And what have you learned? Well, in this scenario, you would have made about $20,000. Okay.
Right. Because you sold it, your contract for $300, $320, you put no cash out.
Yep.
You just got the contract, you got the agreement.
Yep. You got it.
I've set my guy up in advance who's going to buy it for me. He's going to say, yeah, I'll buy it from you for $320. It's worth $400. I'm going to make $50,000 off to that's $30. I'm going to make $50,000 on this property. You did the legwork, you found it for me. I'm happy to give you $20,000 for me to make $50. So pretty cool.
It's a simple strategy, and the value is this. You're going to learn every aspect of the business besides the construction management side of it. You're going to learn how to find properties, you're going to learn how to value them. And you might have 10, 15 hours committed, and you have a contract on one side, you sell, it's called an assignment of contract, you sell the contract, and it's a very simple process, but what it does is it gives you experience. And then you say, hey, wait, why would I wholesale it? I could maybe go raise some money and fix this property up and make more. Tony's going to make, let's say $35,000 in profit. Why wouldn't I capture $55,000 of profit in this transaction? Yeah. And so it's a baby step. And that's when I got started, this is how I got into the business. And then I realized, gosh, there's other strategies that are even better. But I'm eternally grateful because it started teaching me some of the fundamental aspects of how we invest.
Cool. So this is wonderful just as a sample, but give me a real life example, and I know you've done this many times.
Sure.
But give me some examples of your students. Give me an example of a student that's done this. Give me a real life example.
In fact, what you're seeing on your screen right now is a couple of our recent wholesale deals, and it just gives you some perspective of the profitability. And so I'll speak to the profitability, and then I'll talk to how somebody who's watching us today, what can they take away from other people that have done this exact strategy. Great. So first of all, when we talk about what we target, we look to target between 5 and 10% of the purchase price of the property as a profit. So if you have a $300,000 house that you're going to buy, we look to target somewhere between 5 and 10% of that value as a profit.
Got it.
Okay, so it can be a very profitable strategy. Now, I'm not guaranteeing I'm not guaranteeing you, what you're seeing on your screen right now is exactly what you're going to earn. Right? Because
every deal's different.
Yeah, every deal is different, and obviously there's a great deal of education that went into me learning the business. But I think what's impactful is one of our first students that we had years ago came to one of our workshops. Her name was Jenna Hoover, and I'll never forget her. She was just a very quiet, reserved, not an overly gregarious person. I'll never forget because she came to me at one of our workshops and she said, "Than, is this a strategy that can really work for me?" And I noticed she had a little bit of skepticism, a little doubt. And I said, well, what is it that you're doubting? Is it yourself or is it the strategy? Right? Yeah. Well, what is it? Yeah. And she said, it's me. I grew up in a household where I was told I would never amount to anything. And, I'm now raising a child all by myself and I'm working, crazy hours. And is this something that will really work? And I said, Jenna, if you're the type of person who just is willing to learn and apply this business model, I think you can use this as a gateway to even more successful transactions beyond wholesaling. Yes. And what's amazing is I watched that young, I would call it not so confident young lady turn into extremely successful entrepreneur over the course of a few years. And she started doing it just from wholesaling. And if you're looking at the screen right now, these are some of the deals that she's done recently. She's now investing in commercial property. She's rehabbing properties. In fact, she got her own TV show. I'm not promising anybody their own TV show, but she has her own TV show that from what she does. And I just think it's a
wow, what progress! That's amazing.
It's amazing.
Really proud.
What's most amazing is just the personal transformation. Yeah. It's not the financial transformation because when I run across her at some of our conferences now, it's a completely different person. Yeah. If you meet her,
I love that.
Confident. Other women in her area and in the industry look up to her, and it's just that transformation is so rewarding because it's just a little bit of effort, and it's amazing what you can do.
Well, what are some other strategies then that you'd recommend people? You say if you start with wholesaling, what are some other strategies for investing in real estate that you think are, you don't think, by experience, really work that someone could start to graduate to? Or if they're already a little bit more advanced, or they have a little bit of capital they could do?
Yeah, great question. So this is a great strategy for anybody who's saying, you know, wholesaling sounds interesting, but you know, I want to get into something maybe a little more interesting, a little more profitable, and something where I can see benefits beyond just, you know, paperwork changing hands, right? And obviously there's a lot of shows on TV about fixing and redeveloping and selling properties. And we've been doing it for 15 years, right? And so this strategy is called rehabbing. It's very simple. It's essentially redeveloping properties. You're buying a property, instead of selling it to somebody else, now you're going to transform that property into something prettier, turn around and sell it. So rehabbing is something that we've been doing for a long time. And I got a couple visuals just to give people a feel. So essentially we're taking homes that look like this and transforming it into something that looks like this. Now, why do I get more interest out of this type of transaction versus wholesaling? Because now you're employing people. You're giving people jobs. You're transforming neighborhoods. You're turning something that's, you're seeing your work product. You know, it's not like when you invest in the stock market, I love it, but it doesn't really have much meaning to me, much value, because I just see numbers go up, account values go up, but as far as, you know, empowering someone's passion and purpose, completely different strategy. So when you can transform something ugly into something pretty, it's very rewarding and it can be very profitable. You know, right now, last year in 2018, the average gross profit was over $65,000 for fix and flip properties. Now, please understand, I am not promising anybody that you're going to go out there on your next transaction and make $65,000. I'm in real estate. You could lose money in real estate. It all depends on your financial education and your approach. But when we're out here and we're starting to do this type of work in our own community, this is really when I think the business has meaning. Because I'll never forget when we started doing it, I had friends and family members turn to me, and all of a sudden they started showing interest. And I realized that was rewarding to be able to share with, you know, my uncle and my aunt and my brother things that we were doing. I felt like I had achieved some level of significance. And the reason I say that is, for a lot of people, that's important, right? It's important to give back to your community in some way. It's meaningful.
And you drive by these communities and you see what you've done. It's a piece of art almost.
It is.
But you've used your creativity and your intelligence to do it. Now that looks like a giant jump for someone who doesn't know what they're doing, but I've seen the education you have, because you literally have, for the size house, by the room, well, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, people can click and see, here are 9 choices, and click print out. Here's what you go to, you know, what would be the store that people go to?
Home Depot.
Like a Home Depot.
We got to get you into a Home Depot pretty soon.
I've been to Home Depot for a while. They go to Home Depot or something like that, and here's the checklist. Here's what to get. Here's what it should cost you. Here's what it cost the guys to do this. So well, that looks so giant for somebody, but not somebody sophisticated, but somebody's not. But I've seen people that aren't sophisticated because of the systems you built be able to do this. And I've been blown away. I was blown away by the absolute level, how you think, the level of detail you think, the checklist you've done, where they go, I like this one, and here's exactly what it'll cost per unit. Here's what it'll cost when I go to Home Depot. I can just hand them this and say, this is what I want, and this is the cost. I mean, you've really done an amazing job on this. But I don't interrupt. I'm just passionate about, when I see these homes, I do the same thing. I've done it in Fiji, multiple places. I love to take something and transform it. And my skills in the beginning, I didn't know how to transform it. I overspent. I did things that made me feel good, but they weren't necessarily the right thing to get the right price out of the property. And you've already learned those lessons. Yeah,
we teach people how to transform homes and transform communities. And what you teach is people how to transform themselves.
Yeah, it's a combination is what they do.
And that's all it is. It's a transformational process. And this is the type of thing we've been doing for 15 years. But I love what you brought up. You brought up a very valid point. And if I could address it, because
please.
The difference between, there's a lot of ways to learn how to invest in real estate, right? There's a lot of different ways. And for me, what we teach is not just the X's and O's of how to invest in real estate, but we teach you the process to actually build what we call a systems-dependent business.
Yes.
And I learned this very early on in my real estate investing career. In fact, the first place I learned it was in my restaurant. I realized that starting a business without systems is a business destined for failure.
It's not a business.
It's not a business.
Because you can't sell something without it. Because how are you going to sell something to someone else? And that's a real business. Something you may not sell it because you love the income or you love the business, but it's not a business unless you can sell it. Otherwise, it's a job, like you described.
You're exactly right.
And the only way, McDonald's doesn't make the best hamburgers. Everybody knows that. But they sell more of them because they got a system that's duplicatable everywhere.
They have the best process.
That's what I love. It's the process. That's what you've done better than anybody I've seen in the business.
And I'll show a couple visuals, if you don't mind, of what that looks like. Because The good thing is, if you're sitting at home, you have a choice. If you're sitting there, real estate, whether you're looking to just buy your own personal residence at a discount, or whether you're looking to buy a single family property or a rental, this will apply to every single person because real estate is going to be part of your financial portfolio. It may already be, and you don't even know it, depending if you're investing in REITs or other things like that. So most people just don't have a great understanding of how it works. And it's not just understanding the transaction, it's understanding the process, right? You use the example of McDonald's. It's a great example. That is a multi-billion-dollar business that is run by minimum wage employees, the majority of the workforce. And you can have the same experience whether you're in Tokyo or in San Francisco, right? You have the exact same outcome, you have the exact same time. It's an amazing business, amazing process. And so when we got into real estate, the story, I didn't realize the importance of systems. And so the first time my partner and I bought a single family fix and flip property, we thought we were going to work on the property. We thought we were going to, lay the carpet, paint, and we didn't know how to do any of the electrical or anything like that, but we thought that's how you do the real estate investing business. Well, at the end of that first transaction, we ended up spending about 6 months of time, and we spent collectively hundreds of hours working on that deal, and we made a grand whopping 27 grand. And so we sat down and we said,
I'm only laughing because I've been there in the early days too.
We said we have to reevaluate not that this business, we have to reevaluate how we approach the business because we were approaching it as amateurs, right? And there's a big difference between amateurs and professionals. When you go to McDonald's, that's a professional organization. When you go to Harry's Hamburgers, that's an amateur organization.
That's right.
And so what he and I started doing, the backstory that led to what we create and really what our students leverage and what we teach is we said, everything that we did, we could document. So we said we spent, 30 hours walking through Home Depot picking out materials. And I said, we could document what we want to go in every single kitchen that we do, every single bath. We could create the scope of work and then we could just pick from these templates so that we don't have to spend those 30 hours on that part of the transaction. We said when we're gathering bids, we can develop a process for that. When we're hiring contractors, we can develop a process for that. And we said, we had the goal, like many people, we wanted to move from technician to manager to entrepreneur in our business.
Owner.
Right, to owner, right? We were basically, when we were changing carpet, we were the technicians. And so what we did is we started taking a professional approach. And I'll give you a visual example, right? This is a visual example of the difference between the way an amateur approaches the business and the way a professional approaches the business. And so the reason I bring this up, Tony, is this was our very first rehab. This is a piece of shit. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yes, I see.
This was the work product. It looks like it needed to be rehabbed again.
So this is what you started with?
And that's what we had.
Not much of improvement.
Right. And the reason I bring this up is everyone starts backwards. And what we did is we said, you know what, we need to not, first of all, we got to have better work product. Otherwise, we're not going to be in the business long. We made a profit on, it's amazing.
That's amazing you made a profit.
Right. But over here, this is what we do now.
This is gorgeous. You want to go here.
Yeah. Now, this is a kitchen, right, that we've used over and over and over again in multiple houses.
Yes.
And this is a property that I visited once. This is a property that I visited, hundreds of times our first transaction. So the difference in the hours of work into this.
And look what this thing started as, if you can see a close-up of that, and then see what it became. But now that you have this template, anybody could go do it. Because you put all the hours in, you gave them the checklist down to the dollars, the amount of time, the energy, what it should cost at Home Depot specifically. Right? And if you're hiring someone to do it, what the cost should be for that contractor, correct?
In fact, I'll show you that right now because I've always said the problem, and you mentioned it, the problem with most businesses, when I had my restaurant, I was everything. I was the cook, I was the chef, I was working the line.
Yeah, I call it the business operator versus the owner.
Yeah,
right?
And I always say the problem with most businesses, they look like this, right? This is how they're organized. That's the problem with right? And that's what when we started in real estate, that was our approach, and we realized we had to make a change. And so slowly but surely, every transaction we said, we're going to compress time. We're going to work less on the project, and each time we do it, we're going to document how much time, how much profit, and so that we can do these types of transactions with a couple hours of work as opposed to hundreds of hours of work. And so I'll give you a case study now. And this is why our students are compelled to study with us, is they realize this is the difference between what we teach and what anybody else teaches about real estate investing, is that we teach a process and then we teach a system-driven business. So I'll use a case study here.
But it's also a system you've already developed for them. That's the part that blows me away. It's not like they have to go figure it out.
So here's a good case study that, because people say, systems this, systems that, I want to show you what systems look like.
Great.
And so that's why I have some visuals here, because this is my life's work and I'm passionate about it. Cool. So this is a home right here, Noreen Way. So very single, this could be anywhere in the country, single family residential property. Nothing sexy about the property, but what's sexy is the process. And so here's how this process evolved, and I'll give people an example. So here's a property that we bought on Nolan. This is the kitchen before, right?
Okay.
And what we did is we said, okay, we have a template that we're going to apply to this kitchen. The contractor doesn't have to make any decision work. They know what materials, they know what's going to cost. And here's the outcome, right? Here's the work product when we're done, okay?
Crazy.
Well, this kitchen we've used many, many times in our property. Just like McDonald's has a recipe for hamburgers, we have a recipe for real estate.
Yes.
It's really that simple. And so on
But just like McDonald's has multiple hamburgers, because people like different things, you also have multiple choices in the same space for people.
Exactly.
Right?
Because we have high luxury properties, we have above median, below median. So we have different templates that we apply depending on the neighborhood, depending on the price point. But then we reuse those over and over again. We do it.
And the cost of these changes beforehand.
Exactly.
Which allows you to know when you're evaluating the property, what will it cost to turn this into that? You know that in advance. So you know whether you can make money or not.
Exactly. So that case study, Noreen, this is Nolan. Well, here's Noreen Way before. We applied the exact same template. It's identical kitchen, maybe a few linear feet of cabinetry difference. But that kitchen and this kitchen were already pre-planned. I didn't have to go pick out materials. I didn't have to meet with the contractors. It's like, this is what we've done before. This is what you're going to apply. I didn't have the contractors making the decision. That's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
Contractors are great at what they do, but they shouldn't be doing design ideas for you. That's an example of a system. Now, when you apply that to every aspect of the business, that's how you go from being a technician to a manager to an entrepreneur.
Which is where you get real freedom, because the freedom is time.
Exactly.
Right? That's really it. I mean, you look at these and you think, who wants to rent or buy that? Who wants to rent or buy that? Who wants to rent or buy that versus that? It changes the game completely.
Yeah. And to give you, visuals, here's another great example of 4 other, same template, 4 different properties applied over and over and over again. And so what we did is, and believe me, when I started, I wasn't the most technical person. I had a great education. But I didn't have any idea about how technology worked. At that time, I knew how to do a Google search, and I was single, so I knew Match.com. I knew that. And I knew that inside and out, right? I had that mastered. But I'll never forget, my partner said, we need to set up a database. And I'm like, what the hell's a database? What do you mean a database? And he said, well, when we do these projects, we'll just have a database of different templates for the kitchen, for the bath. And so I said, that's brilliant. And so he started to develop it. We started to run all of our product through it. And so now what we do, if we go in, here's our database of different aspects of a home. And so we'll come up and we'll say, okay, we're going to redesign a kitchen, right? And let's say, I'm going to come here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a template, just like you said.
Wow, look at this.
Okay, so here's the template we use for Noreen Way. Now, in higher end kitchens like this, we're going to use a different template. The cost difference might be $5,000, right, in labor and materials. And if we're going into a rental property, we're going to use this template. Yeah. Right? If we're going into a U-shaped kitchen, we're going to use this, or a galley kitchen, we're going to use this. And so we design these templates for kitchens, bathrooms, landscaping. And this was our recipe. And we said, brilliant. Like McDonald's has hamburgers, we're going to roll houses out on this process. And so what we did is, for this template, which you saw in Noreen Way, we have in our database, we have every single material that goes in here, the cost, where we ordered it from, the SKU, store number, the link. So we print this, and what we do is we give it to a contractor. Well, gosh, when Paul and I did that on our first project as amateurs, right? A couple kids that didn't know what the hell they were doing, that took us 30 hours. Yeah. 30 hours of picking, walking, and that's where most people get frustrated with any business, right? And so when people come to our workshops and they're learning these processes and they're learning these steps, we take them through a process and we say, okay, this is one aspect I've been describing here, but this is our process for how we do everything when we're rehabbing properties, cool. Right? From what do we need to know about construction? We're not going to do the work. We're going to hire other professionals to do it.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you recommend people do the work themselves, or do they hire someone?
Yeah, absolutely hire somebody else, right?
I agree
to be successful in any business, you have to have leverage.
That's
and
right.
You got to create leverage other people's time, because if you're installing carpet or painting your house, you're saying my time's worth $20 an hour.
That's right.
Right? when you can hire
And
somebody
that's
else
all
to
it'll
do it.
ever be worth if you
Yeah.
do that. Right?
And that's what my time was worth on our first project,
That's
right?
right.
And we look at it now. And so we walk people through this system from how we estimate repairs when we get to a property, how we make our offers, how we create a scope of work, how we find contractors. And this is what we teach. This is our curriculum. In fact, if someone comes to one of our events, this is what we teach on day 2. We say, hey, for those who are interested in the active side of the business, we're going to teach you what we've been doing for 15 years. And what that does is compresses time. Somebody's like, gosh, I want to go out there and be successful, but I don't want to spend 15 years doing it. Well, we've been spending 15 years doing it.
Yeah.
Right? And I have thousands of hours of my own time and my staff's time into
And $1
development.
billion worth of real estate you guys have done over that time. It's pretty amazing.
And that's what people are learning. And what's happening is people are making less mistakes. There's risk in real estate. There's great profit potential. There's tremendous risk. And so the only way to mitigate, you'll never eliminate, the only way to mitigate risk is to have the knowledge in the process, because a lot of people will watch a show. I've been on a reality TV show where we filmed many different episodes. In fact, we filmed 30 episodes on A&E's Flip This House.
Yeah.
And the reason they selected us was simply because of this. They wanted to film multiple shows at once. And so they did a nationwide search. They found us. The reason I bring that up is I've seen so many people who say, oh, I'm going to go out there and do this. And they watched a couple episodes of, This Old House or some show.
Yeah.
And the next thing they know, they're putting their life savings on the line.
That's right.
Right? And they have no education. They have no process. Well,
And they're learning trial and error. It's like I always teach modeling, right? You want to model someone who's already successful, proven it, done it for decades, and you want to find out whether they know, because it took them 10 or 20 years to figure it out. You don't want to spend 10 or 20 years. You want to figure out in a few weeks, a few months, a few days, a few hours what they know, and then apply it and save yourself all the ups and downs. That's what's beautiful about your process.
I read your book, Awaken the Giant Within. I'll never forget that, modeling other people. And I said, that's what I need to do. I know there's people that do what I want to do, right? Everything that I'm teaching you, I've learned from mentors, from people that have guided me along the way, right? And it's a great example. And so when people come in, this is the difference between profitability and potentially putting your life savings at risk. And real estate can be extremely profitable, right? But it all depends on your approach, your process, and your system. And so that's what we teach, clients of yours that have come to our events. It's amazing to see what they do and how much they grow and how much they learn.
Tell me, for people out there saying, okay, this really looks interesting, I'd like to learn this, but how do I, if I don't have capital, get capital to fund these kinds of rehabs or redevelopments of a property like this?
Yeah, great. Probably the most common question I get, right?
Okay.
Which is, okay, I have some money set aside. I could get involved in wholesaling, but I don't know if I have $300,000 or $200,000 to buy a property and do what you're saying. Nobody does. When I started, I had $30,000 in the bank, and I was trying to manage a restaurant and get involved in real estate at the same time. And so the beauty of real estate is that real estate can be a vehicle for people that don't have capital, that are looking to do a little bit of work and understand the process. And real estate can be a vehicle for people that do have money that want to earn a high rate of interest.
Yeah.
And so what we started doing very early on was borrowing private money, right? Could be an individual like yourself, very wealthy individual. You have different problems that most people don't have. You want to deploy your capital.
Right.
You want to earn. You don't want your money sitting in the bank.
And in the world we're in, how do you get the nice return when it's so secure?
So what we started doing is we started approaching other investors, other business owners. We said, hey, we'll pay you a high rate of return. You're going to become a private money lender. So they become the bank, right, on these transactions. And so how have we financed these transactions over the past 15 years? 3 ways. Private money. Hard money is essentially private money from a more sophisticated lender. And then bank financing, right? Those are the 3 best sources of financing. And for these types of transactions, which you're getting in and out of relatively quickly, private money is the most flexible, right? It has, generally you can utilize it the quickest, because a lot of times the reason we create discounts when we buy is because we buy quickly, right? Versus somebody who has to go out there and get a traditional bank loan.
Right.
And so it gives you an advantage. And then for the lender, they're earning 8, 9, 10, 12% interest on their money.
Yes.
Well, gosh.
Secured by the real estate.
Secured by a hard asset.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, people go to business school, work on Wall Street, manage billions of dollars, and they're trying to beat 8%. And so you can come and find a discounted property and offer someone 10%. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be very interested in lending. And that's essentially how the business works. That's how our students do it. That's one of the things we teach on the second day of our workshop is how to go out there and actually raise the capital from other people. And I will caution you though, because I think people, if you're going to be borrowing other people's money, you have a duty to be educated, right? You want to protect their investment. You want to make sure you know what you're doing, right? Because you're not only trying to earn a profit for you and your family, but you have a financial duty to take care of them as well. But that's how we do it. And so I was able to start with very little capital. Most of our students don't have the capital to do 1 or 2, 3 transactions at a time, so they start borrowing money, and that's essentially how they do it.
So how long, if I'm approaching a private investor and saying, listen, I've got this education, let me show you my system, and you can show an investor things like this, it certainly gives a lot more certainty, and I'm going to give you 8, 9, or 10% return for it. How long is that my money tied up in a situation like, I know it varies by project, but I know you know on average, because you know the systems, you know how long it takes. So how long does a project like this take on?
It's a great investment for a private lender because typically the loans are less than a year, right? A project like I showed you here would take us about 3 months.
That's what I thought, 90 days.
You know, a new investor, even with our process, it might take them 4, 5, 6 months. So typically we'll do a year-long loan, and that transaction may only take 4, 5, 6 months. So something single family, that's the time frame. It's not as quick as wholesaling, right? That's the best way to dip your toe in the water, but it is still a relatively quick process from the time you acquire a property until the time you actually sell it in profit.
Tell us a little bit about your 3-day workshops where you teach these things. First of all, they're ridiculously cheap, and I'd expect several $1,000s, like most things you see on TV. They give you a free workshop, and it's an hour. And I know everybody does those type things so they can expose people. But then they'll usually sell something that costs thousands of dollars, and education's worth thousands of dollars. But I sent a couple of my people, because I'd heard from several people how great it was, to the workshop who were interested in this area, and they raved, and they still rave about what they got out of just those 3 days. Tell us about the 3-day workshop, what you teach there. Tell us how that process works.
It's I'm glad you asked, because I'm very proud of what we've created to help entrepreneurs and investors get started. At our workshops, we teach people both the active side of the business, that's wholesaling and rehabbing, but we also teach them the passive side. Because
interesting.
We have a lot of clients who say, hey, I don't want to get involved. This seems like work.
A lot of work,
right? I just want to buy some rental properties going to pay me each month, or I want to make some investments in commercial properties. And so we divide our workshop between these 2 strategies. So the first thing we start with is the active side, and then the second half of the 3-day workshop, we teach the passive side. Now, we start logically where most people want to know and how to get started, which is how to find these opportunities. So we go through, you're not going to just walk out on the street and talk to an agent, and all of a sudden you're going to have an influx of deals. So we go through all the marketing strategies we use, how we find deals both on the MLS, using direct mail, online marketing. So we basically
MLS being multi-listing service. If you're not familiar, that's where people place their real estate when they're going to sell it.
So we go through what we've done to acquire over 1,000 of these properties over the past 15 years and what those strategies are, right? And so people walk away knowing, okay, I know I'm going to get a deal. Now, the next step, which we teach on day 1, is how do we analyze that deal? How do we make sure
it's worth doing?
How do we make sure we're not overpaying, we're not putting ourselves at risk, and how do we make sure we're setting ourselves up to profit? So we teach due diligence process, we teach the acquisition process, contracts, how to fill out a contract, and depending on the strategy, what to do with that contract, and then how to perform due diligence. Then at the end of day 1, we teach wholesaling, which is the easiest way, I think, for most people to learn the business by doing a transaction or 2. That's not where you should stay, because there's much more profitable areas. And that's what we start talking about on day 2 and day 3. So day 2, we teach, the first thing we teach is how to raise capital, right? Because that's the next part of the transaction.
That's right.
So private money, creative financing, like subject to deals, owner financing. We teach bank financing, which is great for certain aspects of real estate. And then we teach the process you see here, the rehabbing process. Then towards the end of that day, what we get into is what I consider to be financial education. Everything I've mentioned so far is real estate education. But part of being a successful entrepreneur is paying less in taxes, is having a tax plan, and protecting your assets. And I don't care who you are, no matter what your net worth is, whether it's here or here, there are things you can do right now that you can pay less in taxes.
And it's all legal and appropriate.
Exactly. The reason I love real estate, and I'll digress for a second, simply because I think it'll be valuable. The reason I got into I didn't know if I was going to love real estate. I got into real estate because at that time in my life, I didn't have a lot of confidence. And so I went from having all the confidence in the world playing in the NFL to having all the confidence to start a business, and then realizing and getting humbled. And so when I started looking at different things that I could do with my life, I said, I want to find the asset class that's going to give me the highest probability of success. I'm a very logical thinker. I said, I want to find something that I hope I can love. And what I realized about real estate is it gives you tremendous tax benefits that other asset classes don't. It gives you have leverage. That's what makes it such a powerful vehicle.
Yeah, you don't have to spend $300,000 out of your pocket to be able to do something like this.
Exactly. And so that's why we made it part of our workshop, because when you're out there doing the things you're doing, you can pay less in taxes. You can protect your assets. When folks come to our workshop, they learn how to save tens of thousands of dollars in taxes. That money can now compound. That money can be invested however they see fit. But it's an essential part of running a real estate business or making a real estate investment is understanding that. Then the third day and the second half of the second day, we teach the passive side. And really we focus on single family rental properties, small multifamily properties, and then commercial properties. And so we're teaching people the most profitable side of the business, the side of the business that really builds long-term wealth. And when people leave there, here's what happens, is they go from really not understanding how real estate works to realizing why it's created more millionaires than any other asset class out there is because it's simple, it's tangible. We just need to learn the steps in the process to do it. And what it does is it gives people confidence to go buy their first property, their second property, their 10th property. We have experienced investors who come because they realize, gosh, I'm kind of stuck where I'm at now and I want to have a breakthrough.
Go to the next level,
right. And so, no matter where you're on that spectrum, you'll invest in real estate, whether it's your own personal residence or a rental property. And it doesn't take a lot of acquisitions to make a big difference in your balance. It doesn't make a lot of acquisitions to make a big difference in your life. And so that's why the 3-day education. Now, what's amazing is some people come to that education, a small percentage, and realize, okay, I definitely want to do the passive side. Like this side I don't want to do, or I want to do this side. And they thought they wanted to do something else coming in. So it gives them a focus. Other people come in and they look at it and go, oh my gosh, this is something that I could do full time. This is something that isn't just going to be, an educated hobby. This is going to be something that I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And so it really pulls back the curtain on those approaches, and that's what we teach.
It gives people choices. I just want to comment, when you talk about assets and income, people who have not yet made a lot of money don't think taxes matter, but every financial advisor, when they come to me, go, oh, here's what your profit is going to be, I'm going to go, show me the net. Because with a small amount of income after you start to build something, you're going to be giving away more than half of what you earned in taxes. And you don't have to legally if you're making investments that the government wants you to invest in. They want more properties. They want more homes for people to live in. They want more apartments. And so they give tax advantages so that we will put our money and time there. But the difference in income is radically different between the gross income of what you think you've earned, like in businesses. People say, oh yeah, we do $100 million a year. Well, what's your net? After tax net, what's that bottom line? And I'm crazy with anybody around me saying, show me the bottom line. And real estate has how many advantages when it's done properly, as you teach.
I'll show you something that just came to mind when you said that, because this was a lesson I know you've learned. One of my mentors taught me very early on. And I think it's impactful, and it's easy to draw. It may not be easy to see on the camera, but let's say we have an income goal, right? And then we have a time goal. And this is the timeline of our life. What I realized many years ago, if my income goal is here, right, a little rudimentary goal here, is I realized very early on that most people work in a job. The reason 95% of people are not prepared for retirement at age 65 is what we're taught in traditional schools just doesn't work. It doesn't work for the majority of Americans out there. 95% of people have traded 40 years plus of their life, and they're not at their income goal. They're not ready to retire. They have to work in retirement. And the reason that's personal for me is this is my mom. My mom, when she reached the age of 65, we did a calculation. I sat down with her, and I realized that she'd have to go back to work at 75. And so the reason I bring this up is I'm going to share with you what saved not only my mother from having to work into retirement, but is going to save a lot of people who are watching right now. Because I realized, this working a job for most people, it doesn't get you there quick enough. Well, what I realized with real estate is that, simply it could get me there much quicker by adding assets, right, to my balance sheet. So now you can still have a job, but you also have assets paying you. Well, what you just said is very impactful, because you can do these same, if these are real estate transactions that are taking you here, you can get to your income goal that much quicker. And it's kind of like there's these little gold coins along the way, things that we call business deductions, 1031 exchanges, captive insurance companies. There's all these things that as a business owner and as a real estate investor, we have the most tax advantage ways. A solo 401k is a great thing, for a business owner. And you do those same transactions.
Yeah, you get there so much sooner.
With these
But more
tools.
importantly, it lasts. Because today the challenge for people is, you hear everybody talking about socialism now, especially a lot of young people. And the reason is it's our fault. We taught everybody go get a job, and they expect more. They grew up in an environment where everything's available instantly, on the web. They have high expectations, and they're like, this isn't working for me.
Yeah.
Well, they never experienced socialism. I'm old enough to remember I went to Moscow when it was still, the Soviet Union. Yeah. I've seen communism, I've seen socialism. Anybody who's gone around the world and actually experienced it, you never go there in a trillion years. But we haven't taught people to be capitalists. We haven't taught them to be investors. We haven't taught them to be a business owner. We haven't taught them to have income and have the income last. Because even if you get the income goal, we're living longer, right? So, it used to be when they came up with Social Security, Social Security 62, 65 years old, 85% of the people passed away by that time.
Yeah.
That's why they made those numbers.
Yeah.
Now you get to
You're living
65
past
years old, you're going to live another 20 years, maybe 30 years if you're lucky, but certainly 20 if you're taking care of your body. There's no way that income is going to last for those people unless they develop a system. Exactly. And that's why that's why I want to have you on, is it's like, I have vehicles. People that own their own business have a vehicle, but even if you own your own business, I always tell people you should have a second business on the side. It's called investing.
Exactly.
So that if anything ever happened to your business, that one still makes your family be taken care of. And it doesn't take much time or energy if you do it the passive way, or if you don't have a vehicle. That's why I want to have you on, is you're providing people a simple vehicle. They can do part-time or full-time. But now they have that vehicle, they can build that up, and they can end up with a business where they can get rid of that job at some point, because the income from that supposedly part-time element gives them the freedom they deserve.
I'm glad you brought it up, because it reminds me of one of our students who came to one of our workshops years ago, and her name's Dee Willard Ruffin. Dee had worked 30 plus years in the Postal Service, and she was first African-American postmaster in her area. And so when she came to our workshop, she said, I'm not where I want to be. I've done well. This isn't somebody who hasn't achieved things in her life, but she said, I'm not where I want to be financially set up for retirement. And, I went through a chart that's very similar to the previous chart I just showed, and she started to connect the dots. And what's amazing about her story is I always say, if you have a little bit of self-motivation, which, if you're watching right now,
you're still watching.
if you're watching right now,
be.
that's what you have. You're different from most people that just talk about wanting to improve themselves financially.
That's right.
And that was her. And so she applied what we teach here. She, in fact, we'll show, if we could cut in a couple clips of her right now and some of the things that she's doing. She's an amazing lady. She started out doing exactly what we teach here. She now has her daughter working for her. She's got her grandson in the business.
That's awesome.
She's got her family in the business. And it's amazing to see that transformation, but her story is not unique. What's unique is if I look, and I'll show a couple visuals here, I want to give a couple examples of students, because it's one thing for me to talk about what we've done, but it's another to show people that have been to our workshop and show what they've done.
And tell me, while you're doing this, why do you have tens of thousands of successful students? I want to know, what do you attribute their success to as you're walking us through this? Tell us, why do you think they're so successful versus, a lot of people are not?
Yeah. This is a great example. The reason, simply put, is because they start out with a systems-dependent business. I started out.
So they don't have the cliff that most people drop off of.
And so, for an example, here's a young student of ours, young lady. This is one of her first rehabs.
Oh, look what it looked like before.
Yeah. If you remember the visual of my first rehab, this
she starts at this level.
This is an example of somebody cutting 5 years off their learning curve. Like, we weren't doing this until year 5.
Right.
And so when I see the student surpass the teacher very quickly,
because she's got all the systems built. You built them for her.
And her story is not unique, because it's just repeated over and over and over again. In fact, I'll show you another. Here's one of first rehab. Look
what it was.
Right? First project.
But she's got the checklist. She knows what the contractor should charge. She has the list to hand them to go to Home Depot. She knows the timelines, or he does, either one in this case.
Yeah. Another example, I'll show you another student, right? First rehab. Right, my business partner Paul and I, we sit down.
Look at what this was like. There's just the joy of creating something like this. Besides making money, just to say, I took this and turned it into this, and a family's now going to love this. This is awesome.
And the thing that's amazing is this is the work product of their first projects. And I'm sitting with my business partner, and we're blown away. We're like, that took us 5 years. That took us 6 years to get to, and so. But it doesn't matter where people live. If you're in Florida and New York and Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., it's just repeated over and over and over again. These are beginning investors and what they're doing. And I'm showing their work product, but the profitability is just as joyous, right?
Yeah, without a doubt.
But I think ultimately it's getting them to live a more purposeful life, right?
Yeah.
Because, and obviously you can tell, Tony, there is a secret to our success. I don't know if you've caught it yet, right? But if
It's all women.
Exactly. We do not
where
coach
are the guys
men.
in here?
We don't. That's the secret to our success. I always, because men, the problem with us men is we don't listen, right? So we do.
We want to do it our way anyway.
We do
not
have
use
a
the system.
few successful men, just a few, right? I'll give you an example. We saw what the women did. Here's one of my favorite students. One of the best listeners we have. Went to our workshop, did everything right. Here's what he does. This is the type of work he, and then he smartens up. He decides, I'm going to do a little bit better here. So men, we don't always listen as well, right? And we have students that do amazing things like this, and like this.
No.
Yeah. How you doing?
That's a guy.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm kidding. Same work product. These are people working the business by themselves.
Okay, good. I'm encouraged by this.
Yeah. At first, you were a little confused. You're like, I don't know if that's a success story.
Yeah.
But it's amazing because we have people that do it as a family business.
I saw that you have some partners, people who partnered up to do it too.
We have sons and daughters. We have mother-daughter. We have father-son. We have family businesses. We have spouses.
Yeah.
We have people that do it by themselves. And that's what I didn't realize about real estate. I got into it because I wanted something that had the highest probability of financial success, and I wanted to see if I could love it.
Yeah.
And I think you can love anything that you put your mind to. If you really learn the business, you dive into it, the intricacies, you can learn to love it. And real estate is challenging, it's creative. But what I love most about real estate, I can say honest to God, is the fact that I work with my two best friends.
That's cool.
And,
So you guys have been friends for what, decades, right?
Yeah, one of my partners since 7th grade.
Wow,
and another
that's
partner
really cool.
since college. And so one I've known, I don't even know how many years, 30 plus years, and the other,
Wow.
I'm getting older now, but 15, 20 plus years. And I enjoy it. I love seeing them in the office. And, if you're sitting there at home, that's the power of real estate is you can make your own team. I was cut from the NFL and I always loved being on a team, and I've had the ability to create my own team. This is an opportunity for you to create your own team, whether it's your son, your daughter. And I'll say the greatest gift is what I'll be able to pass on to my kids.
Yeah.
Because it's I'm not talking about just assets. I'm talking about the knowledge.
Yeah, the ability to create life the way they want it and to add value to other people. In the end, the only way you succeed in business is you do more for others than anybody else is doing.
Yeah.
That's really why I want to have you on, because I'm still, even seeing these pictures again, still blown away to see what people do first time out of the lot.
Yeah.
I mean, compressing all that learning and getting rid of all that waste of time, energy, and unfortunately money people have is huge. Tell me, jump back for a second though, before we finish up here. Tell me, what would you say is the difference between, how do you look at flipping properties versus real estate with buy and hold? Tell me a little bit about that and how you look at that.
So what I realized a long time ago, and what I'll share with everybody at home is the active side of the business is how we can create capital, but that's not where the real long-term wealth is built. When you buy and hold properties, that's when you start getting unique tax benefits.
Yeah.
That's when you can use leverage in very unique ways. That's where you can, real estate is a hedge against inflation. It actually benefits from inflation.
Yeah.
And so owning properties long-term, the value of those assets can go up significantly.
And your renters can be paying for it for you. They get a great home and they're paying for the asset to grow. Well, it's not coming out of your pocket if you've done it right.
And so I think this is ultimately the best area of real estate. And that is owning assets, whether it be a single family property or a commercial property long term, because it benefits from all these economic factors. And so rental properties, I think is a very applicable to many people if you're watching. If you're starting out, if you just bought 2 homes per year for the next 10 years, you could put yourself in a spot to achieve financial freedom. If you just
not security,
have the
but
discipline.
actual freedom.
Yeah. And if you have bigger goals than that, you can do it much faster, right?
Yeah.
Through commercial acquisitions or more single family properties. But if you just had a few homes, and think about it, if you're sitting at home, imagine if you had bought 5 properties 30 years ago. Imagine what those properties would be worth today. Imagine what type of rental income those would bring in today. For most people in most areas around the country, that could be financial security. Yeah. So we're not talking about hundreds of moves and you got to be a real estate icon or you just have to make some simple, strategic, educated moves.
Yeah.
I will say though, it requires time to build that wealth. And so the most important thing is that we do it quickly, right? As opposed to saying, hey, I'm going to do this 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Because long-term wealth in real estate is achieved by owning the asset and having it pay you each and every month. But that's not something that's down the road. Procrastinators lose in real estate.
Yeah.
People that take
lose in
action.
all investments.
Exactly. And so that's what
And the time's going to go by. You're going to clip your fingers, and it's going to be 10 years. I mean, So why not have those 10 years arrive where you want to be, as opposed to somewhere else by doing just a little bit each year? You don't have to change your job. You don't have to change anything else if you want to. Yeah. Or you can jump in and say, "This is my passion. This is my life. Let me go whole hog in it." Let's, as we go to finish up here. I know you make investments in apartment buildings and commercial real estate. Tell us a little bit about that side of the business.
Yeah. In fact, it's very similar to what we do from single-family properties. It's just on a grander scale. Right, and so what we call this is commercial real estate syndications. And I'll break down, I'll give you a visual of what a commercial real estate syndication looks like. Here's an asset that we own. This is a 181 unit apartment building in Dallas, Texas, closely located to Love Field. So if you've ever been to Dallas, great market, apartment building that we bought. Business plan is very simple, right? To buy this property, increase the rents $200 per unit, 181 units that we look across. And when you increase the value of that by $200 across 181 units, what it does is pushes the value up $13 million.
Wow.
So we bought it for just over $30 million. This is a property that'll be worth $43 million when we're done with the business plan. Why do I like these assets? Well, I'm going to write on the board if you don't mind.
Sure, go for it.
I got my really skinny
I love that we
pen
turned this
here.
into a workshop. That's what I wanted. Thank you for that.
So the reason I love single family, right, I'll just put SF, and commercial, right, to keep it brief, is first of all, most important is cash flow. One of my mentors told me, besides your blood pressure, your weight, the most important numbers to track in your life is cash flow.
So true.
I'll never forget that lesson.
Yeah.
And what he said is track it every year, every month, and make sure that number grows. Because if you do that, that's what creates financial freedom.
That's right.
So the reason we buy assets like this and single family properties, first and foremost, is for positive cash flow each month.
Yeah.
So every single rental property I own, every single commercial property I own, I don't manage it, right? I started out managing it, and I quickly reversed that because I realized that's not a good use of my time.
Exactly right.
The most important rule, though, is that we buy properties with positive cash flow from day one, right? I don't like taking unnecessary risks that we don't have to. The reason you might have heard people losing money in real estate in 2006, 2007 is they go in and they buy maybe a house in Las Vegas that didn't have cash flow, and they were hoping it was just going to go up in value. Well, it didn't go up in value. It actually fell in value. And the reason they were forced to sell is they didn't have cash flow.
That's right. Because later on, the property values have gone back up. Right?
In 2008, I owned a ton of rental properties. Now, the value of all of those assets across the board fell.
Meaning what people would be willing to pay in 2008 for them. Yeah.
But I wasn't forced to sell. I just sat on the cash flow. I had the same tax benefits. I had the exact same income coming in. In fact, the cash flows went up during that period.
Yeah.
And that's
because more people need a place to rent.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so we don't buy a single family rental property or a commercial property unless it has cash flow.
That's
period.
correct.
Second is equity buildup. I'm a terrible speller right here, and this pen can't spell that well, but right, equity buildup. Well, what's happening? You said it. We're borrowing, think about this, we're borrowing money from a bank to go out there and buy an asset. We're putting a down payment down, and then the tenant is paying down the debt.
That's right.
And so each and every month, each and every year, we build equity because the tenant is servicing the debt. I wish we could do that with everything that we bought, right?
Yeah, of course.
So that's the second one. The third one is what I call appreciation. And there's a lot of ways to force appreciation or just benefit from appreciation. Well, I'm going to talk about this one real quick because this is important.
Okay.
If you're going to own assets long term, I'll ask you a question. Wouldn't it be nice if we could have a crystal ball, right? And we could predict the future. Well, if you study...
Better to make it.
Yeah, right? Obviously, nobody has a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But if you study Carl Icahn, if you study Warren Buffett, what they study, and I'll never forget reading about these two gentlemen, is they both studied policy and demographics.
Yeah.
And they study fiscal policy and monetary policy.
Yeah.
And they study population demographics. And the reason they study it is to track what inflation is going to do in the future.
Right.
And I'll never forget that because I was reading a book, I don't remember which one, it was about Warren Buffett, but and I've read a few about him. But he said, you have the ability to predict the future if you study policy. And I didn't really know what that meant. And then he started to relate it to inflation and investing in businesses and investing in assets. And so if you're going to own a single family house, or 5 of them, or 20 of them, or an asset like this for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I want to know that if inflation eats away at our money, inflation is going to benefit the asset.
That's right.
Well, here's what's happening is inflation is going to continue. And the reason I asked, wouldn't it have been nice to own 30 home or buy some homes 30 years ago? That home hasn't changed. Yeah. What's changed is inflation.
That's right.
And that's why the asset or the house is worth more. Well, when you own these assets, if we go back here, go up in value. Now, they go through cycles, and I'm not saying next year it's going to spike up or spike down. A cycle might look like this, but ultimately it's going here because inflation, right? These assets are increasing in value.
That's right.
The liabilities are going down because the tenants are paying.
Because you're paying down the liability show.
And so my goal is to use a healthy amount of leverage to buy these assets like this, right? And we do that in a couple ways. For this particular investment, I'll give an example here. So here's just some pictures of the asset. So what we did is we did a syndication, okay? And we do this all the time with retail assets, with commercial assets. And this is something we teach at our workshop as well, especially for people that have a little bit of capital and are like, hey, I got to get it out of a bank. I got to get it earning, interest. I got to have it invested somewhere. And so commercial syndication is very powerful. So we are the sponsors, right? We're the operators. We have the business plan. We're going to execute it over 5 years. We have a bunch of passive investors in this apartment building who are also owners. And so what do they get? They get a percentage of the cash flow. They get a percentage of the profits when we ultimately sell the property. They get a percentage of the tax benefits that come their way. And so they're an owner, yet they don't have to commit the time.
Yeah.
And so it's a win-win because we can utilize leverage. We put money into the deal, of course, but we can utilize leverage both from debt on the property and equity from our passive investors. And along the way, they have all the benefits of ownership and they earn a great rate of return on their money. Now, this is what I call syndication.
Right.
And so a lot of people go, well, okay, apply that to me, Than. It's nice you show 181 unit apartment building. Where would I start? Start with a 4 unit. Start with a 5 unit. Yeah, all it is like 4 single family properties put together. Yeah. Because when we look at this, the other area that's very attractive is the tax benefits. Man, I am a horrible speller. I don't know if anybody can read this. Maybe we can superimpose over it. But it's because these assets are going up in value over time. They may go through cycles, but think about this. The rents are going up. Why? Because of inflation.
Right.
The value of these assets are going up, and we can force the value of these assets up, and we get
Talk about how you force the appreciation a little bit.
Yeah. So what we do on this asset, our goal is to get the net operating income to increase, right?
$200 a unit in this case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the value of this real estate is based on the net operating income. So we're going to decrease expenses and we're going to increase the rents, and that's what forces the value. Now, to create that value, you don't just raise rents $200 and get every tenant to accept it. So what we do is we fix it up. Yeah. We go into the units, we put in about $3,000 to $4,000 per unit to just, and these are like basic rehabs over and like what I showed
Same
you,
thing.
single, yeah. But even easier because you're doing
smaller.
it over and over
Yeah.
and over and over again, same template, right? Mm-hmm. And that's basically at its core the business model. That's now, cool. Ultimately, we decide at the end of the ownership period, do we want to sell? Do we want to keep it? Right? If we want to keep it, we'll refinance, return capital to investors. Now our goal is within 5 years to return 100% of capital to investors. So now there's no reason to sell whatsoever, and they have an infinite return, right? Really, and they continue to get operational cash flows, and then ultimately sell the asset when it's at the best time in the market.
Yeah. Or you can exchange it, I assume, and
yeah.
exchange something else. And if you don't know about exchanges, you pay no taxes on an exchange.
Exactly right.
So now I get to defer those taxes and I continue to grow even higher. This has been a huge, obviously, part of my personal portfolio.
Yeah, and it's great because you benefit all along the way. If we refinance, those proceeds are returned, right? Yeah. So this is the value of syndication. When we look at all of these things, it's very compelling. And a lot of people go, gosh, I want to be here. Now, some people are sitting there and say, I want to be here because you're going to earn even more
Exactly
if you learn the business. And that's what we teach our workshop is how do you find small we don't start with 181 units. We start with like a 4 unit, and then we'll do a 20 unit case study.
Yes.
Then we talk about something even bigger like that.
And so when people learn this, after the 3 days, they've learned fundamentals. And then if they want to get coached to do something more sophisticated, that's where you have, like I have my Master University, I know you have your similar situation. So just for people watching right now, tell me right now, how can I help somebody right now watching? What would you recommend they do? What's the best first steps for someone?
The first step is to come to one of our 3-day workshops.
Great.
Right? That's where people get the fundamental education of how to do the business. Right? And we do our 3-day workshops all around the country. In fact, if you're watching at home right now, on the screen, you actually have the ability to enroll for the workshop right here.
Oh, great.
Very
Wonderful.
simple. And we make it very affordable, right?
How many cities do you teach in?
Yeah, so we teach in over 80 cities around the country.
That's amazing.
And it's been the joy of my life to have people who are all different experience levels. We have people that are real estate pros to people that have never done a single real estate deal whatsoever in that workshop.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see, because we have so many different strategies, and because they're learning processes, everyone in that, no matter where you are on that spectrum, you're going to learn something, right? If you're a pro, you're going to learn the difference between, doing a few deals or 10 deals or 20 deals a year and what it takes to do 50, 60 deals a year.
Yeah.
If you've never done a deal, right, you're going to learn, okay, how over the course of 12 to 24 months can I walk away with a plan to go out there and buy some rentals, and then go out there and acquire and do some wholesaler rehab transactions? And that's what we teach over the course of 3 days.
Here's the best part. Tell them what you charge for this thing.
So
it blows my mind.
Yeah. So
for the 3-day course, what do you charge?
So online at any time you can register. It's $500. We charge because Tony and I have a relationship, and believe me, Tony's a great negotiator and a good friend. But one of the things we want to do is make it very affordable for everyone to come.
That's what I wanted.
And so it's $197 to come to the workshop.
For 3 days.
For 3 days.
So if you've been in mind, my program's looking cheap now. I mean, you guys do an amazing job with it. And if you decide to go, I really want to encourage you to take a part in this piece if you're looking for a vehicle like this, and educate yourself, not fly off and watch a show and try to do this, but to really get yourself educated. So we're throwing in 2 things for you as well, because what ends up happening when you do this, you have the education, and then the only thing that will stop you is, perhaps if you don't have the psychology or the mindset or the drive to make it happen. So I'm going to include for you with this at no charge my Ultimate Edge program for you, a digital version of it. So that's $230 if you normally purchase that. And then in addition, we'll give you $100 off if you want to come to Unleash the Power Within if you haven't already been there, so that you have that side taken care of as well. If you want, the 2 together can be extraordinary. But even if you don't go to your mind, you'll get the Ultimate Edge program. I just really want to support you in getting a vehicle. I'm at this stage of my life privileged to be able to have so many choices, but I've come from nothing, as you know, just like you did. And I just want people to have this vehicle if they want it, if they're looking for it. And for me, it's a major part of my portfolio, and I'm fortunate enough at this stage of life to have an education in this area. But this surpasses any education I ever got, and it surpassed anything any of my friends have gotten who've come to see you. So that's really why I want to honor you and get as many people exposed as possible. So check out it online and get yourself registered if you'd like to go and make that happen. Have we left anything out that you want to cover?
I don't think so. I'll leave with a couple parting thoughts. If you've tuned in and you're this far watching Tony and I think the value that Tony brings is, we teach the system, the model, the business. The value that Tony brings is psychology. To run that model, you need both to ultimately be successful. So I appreciate you including one of your programs, because it's only going to help those individuals who take our class be that much more succcussful.
I know that.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
And I look forward to meeting you. I know many of you will come to one of the events, and I'll have the opportunity to meet you personally. And I consider this to be my calling, teaching investors how to make a better life for themselves financially. And you'll be amazed at how far you can go 12, 24, 36 months from now when you apply and apply these strategies to your life.
Well, Than, you're an example of it. What I love about this man, why we became friends, is there's no hype, as you can feel in him. He's a straight shooter, and this is an environment filled with hypester people.
Sure.
And I just love how you've taken yourself from the NFL, the restaurant, to here. The journey you've gone on is something I think most people can relate to, and because you've done it, and you've done it consistently, and there's no BS in it, then anybody else who really wants to can pick whatever path they want, a rapid path, a full gain path, a gentle path, and I hope people will at least get on the path so they make that happen. So thanks for spending the time with me, brother.
Thank you.
It's great
I
to see you
appreciate
again.
it. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Take good care. Check us out. I hope you'll see you at a workshop. I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Blessings, and keep living with passion.